Hi, I'm Nick. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going through a topic where if you are someone who is looking to buy your first property, do you consider a $1 million HDB flat because this is so common these days? Or do you consider private route, maybe a private resale about the same quantum, but you compromise on maybe location and compromise in space? So I believe a lot of the Henrys out there, your high earners, not rich enough, this is really difficult crossroad to navigate because yes, you have a bit of income. You can afford a very nice HDB, although a bit expensive, but nice location, good size. Or do you want to go for a private residential, but you compromise on location and size? So let me help you navigate this. If you are new to this channel, my name is Nicholas. I do real estate content like this. I share real estate strategies. Everything's from my personal opinion. And I also share my personal journey of selling and buying. You can check all the videos out here in the top left-hand corner. If you like some content, please consider subscribe. It will really help my channel grow. Okay, so imagine this. First thing, when we look at $1 million HDB, who are the people who can afford this? Actually, not that difficult. So let's break down the math. For $1 million HDB, the loan we are looking at will be 75% loan. This is regardless if you're looking at bank loan or a HDB loan from HDB. 75% loan max is $750K. Household income for this $750K is roughly about $13K200. So that is just below the cap of the $14K family household income to be eligible for your $80K grant, which is right over here. So let's say you are eligible for this grant and then you are also staying close to your parents because this is very common these days. You are getting essentially $100K from the government in terms of grants for your first property. And that's why maybe you'll be like, oh, actually that makes a lot of sense because I don't want to miss out on this grant, right? Then after this, you just need to top up another $150K, which makes up together $250K in terms of cash and CPF. Of course, I have not considered the stamp duty, but that's not so substantial at this juncture. But that's just the math of how it works and how we should finance a $1 million HDB. And I believe for most people, if you're earning about $7K per person on average, that's something that is easily achievable. And you are probably in your early 30s. I think this is easily achievable. And that's why maybe you are someone who is looking at these options. So let's see a case study. So today, if you are looking at Bidadari, and this is, really growing estate, very, very hot because it's city fringe, you have all the amenities down there. Let's look at the transactions at Bidadari. So Bidadari 4-room HDB, right now we have transactions from 1 million all the way to 1.2 something, 1.23888. So let us take an average of maybe 1.15 million just for discussion's sake. I think it's fair. So it's not the highest, not the lowest. And for this block is right over here. They were talking about walking distance to MRT. So if you are someone who is buying a first house, maybe you don't have a car, honestly, proximity to MRT is almost everything. And if you do commute to work very often, you go to CBD, you go to town, then the proximity of your MRT station to CBD is also very important. Hence, Woodley might be something that you are looking at because you'll be like, oh, this is a very new town, everything is starting, and it's also very exciting to be living in a town where a lot of new families are starting. If you do want to have kids, you also want to have you also want your kids to be growing up with your neighbors, with young kids as well. So it's a very nice and bright estate lah. Then let's consider what is the risk of buying a $1 million HDB, because I'm here to share with you all these risks lah. So I actually went to look into the Statistics of Singapore report. The key thing I want to understand is how are we going to deal with retirement as an idea? Because if you're someone who is looking to buy $1 million HDB, potentially you might be like, okay, I will just buy $1 million HDB, stay all the way until I want to retire, and that's about it, because I just need a shelter over my head and I'm happy with it. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. But let's see how this can potentially pan out. So this report actually tells us that for 65 years old and over people, non-employed, what is the per household member expenses? And that's quite interesting. So on average, people are spending about $1,384 per person in this situation, and that's in 2023. So in this whole video, I'm just going to ignore inflation and just say that, okay, maybe today we need 1,003. Yeah, many years later when we retire, we also need the same amount, just so that it's easier in terms of calculation. So if we take 1,384 from 65, and let's say we guess we might die only at 95 years old, since CPF, they also predict is up to 95. Let's take 95 years old, okay? Then per person is about $500,000 over here needed from 65 to 95, and that's just per average expenses. I think this is not including any household healthcare issue and all those extravagant stuff if you want to do lah. It's just average amount. 2 people would then require about $1 million in retirement. So why am I using 2 people? Because right now, if you were to buy a HDB, it will be under 2 people's name, and that will affect both people. So once again, I want to say that for this video, just for easier explanation, I'm just going to ignore the whole idea of inflation, where today's 1 million will potentially be maybe 20, 30 years down the road, might be 2 million kind of thing, because it's all very difficult to grasp in terms of numbers. Since the HDB, if it's 1 million, let's just assume that at age 65, it will still be worth $1 million for easier discussion. Then let's talk much more about retirement. So if today you were to buy a $1 million HDB, and assume you are about 30 years old and you haven't formed your family, you don't have kids yet, potentially one option when you retire is to sell your HDB and live with your kids. Am I right? I mean, this is a possible option that you can explore. And in this way, if you do sell your $1.15 million HDB, then that's very good. You potentially can set aside a sum of money for your kids just so that they can house you and for all the filial piety. A bulk of that 1.15 million, potentially you can keep it for retirement. And honestly, that would be good. That would be sufficient. It's just that we need to ask ourselves, is this really a viable option? Because for me, I think it will be quite difficult for me to even live with my parents at this stage unless much later. It will not be my first priority. So even if I do have kids, I don't think I would want to move in with my kids. Yeah, so that's something for you to think about also, whether or not financially this makes perfect sense. Nothing wrong with that. Just in reality, do we want to do this? How feasible is this? This is my question to you. But financially, if this makes sense, yeah, I think you are all set for retirement, because 1 million is what we needed all the way here. So if you sell your HDB, let's say the HDB doesn't grow, right? 1 million, you bought for 1.15, you sell for 1.15, you have $1.15 million in your bank for retirement. And that's sufficient according to this report. Okay, second strategy. If we don't sell and live with our children, what can we do? We potentially can rent out both our bedrooms, because most of the people will be buying 4-room, 5-room HDB. Then maybe you'll be living in the master. Why? Because master, you have your ensuite. It's easier for you to go to the bathroom, things like that. Especially at old age, I think that's quite important. So I will assume you will rent out common rooms. And the common rooms rental is about $1,200 per month. And let's just assume, once again, no inflation. So we stick to $1,200 all the way here. Both bedrooms, you will get $2,400. So just now, the calculation I did, 2 people expenses will be about $2,700 needed. Then you realize that you still have shortfall about $368 if you go with this strategy. So what this means is that you would still need to prepare extra sums for retirement on top of this strategy if you want to use this. So yeah, not the most foolproof. And also you need to consider living with tenants, living with strangers. Is that going to be convenient? Is it going to be comfortable at older age? Do you really want to put through all this? So that's something you can think about. Then third would be sell your 4-room HDB and buy a 3-room flat. I think this is quite a common strategy that most Singaporeans do. Let's look at how feasible this is. So assuming you stay in Bidadari your whole life and you grow to love the estate so much, you go to the Cai Peng store, the Cai Peng person look into your eyes and already know what liao, what cai you want, right? You without even saying. Or you go to buy your fried kway teow, the person exactly know whether you want ham or you want hiam. They know exactly. So you're so used to it already and you want to stay in Bidadari. So let's look at Bidadari 3-room transactions now. So the 3-room transactions are from 700 plus, all the way to 900K. So I'm just going to take a long shot and say that let's take an average of 800K for a 3-room flat. in Bidadari, then you'll be asking, wow, why so expensive? Okay, because this is a newer estate at a very prime location. Then another school of thought will be that actually I don't need to stay in this location, right? But let's just assume, you want to stay back because you're used to it, number one. Number two, you have to factor in that by the time you buy, this is not that new an estate. In fact, this will be a very, very old estate, already quite a mature estate. At that point in time, you have not much options. So anything new, potentially the resale price is going to be even higher. So I think this is quite a realistic take on how the 3-room flat will be. Okay, but how the math will be like, right, will be 1.15 minus 800. You are only getting about 300 plus K in return. And this 300 plus K is definitely lesser than the 1 million needed for both people, isn't it? Yeah, so that is another concern that I have because, if you were to go by this route, then sadly, it's not sufficient. Then you still need to utilize money from your own savings for retirement. And not to mention, on top of this 350K, is that there's still reno that you need to consider. Reno fees, assuming no inflation, roughly it might take 50 to 70K. And this is on top of what is needed. So then your 350K will further reduce to 280 to 300K thereabout. So really, I think this strategy might be, quite difficult if you're just relying on your house for retirement. Then the next one would be to sell your 4-room HDB and buy a 2-room Flexi from the government. So for 2-room Flexi, for the older people, you can choose how many year lease of 2-room Flexi do you want to buy. So assuming you're doing this at age 65 and you want to live up to age 95, then maybe you'll be looking at the 30 years one. So I'm assuming about $140,000 over here because you want to make sure that you have a house until you pass on. Taking Towner Breeze, this is in Boon Keng area because once again, you are already used to the area. You want to stay back in the same area. I think that's a reasonable assumption. So assuming you sell your 4-room HDB 1.15, left with 1 million. After you pay the $140,000, reno 30 to 50K, you barely made it. So this is also a viable option. But yes, once again, you need to question yourself. 2-room Flexi is just a bedroom plus a living room and a small kitchen. You need to ask yourself whether this is something that you really want for your retirement years because you work so hard, right? Do you really just want to, retire at a 2-room Flexi? Because I think, in terms of space, it will be quite difficult. So food for thought. Or my last suggestion to you, which is the strategy that I'm going for, is to really build my net worth, my net asset value from a smaller property size to a potentially a 3 million condo over here. Honestly, the figures doesn't matter. It could be a 2 million condo, it could be 2.5, it could be 3, it could be 3.5, it could be 5 million, it could be 10 million, doesn't matter. But the idea is, at the end of the day, where do you want to retire in? So for me, I'm quite set in living in a 4-room HDB or 2-bedroom condo, whichever works for me. But the thing is, if let's say the 4-room HDB is worth 1.15, right? And my condo is about 3 million. Let's say I work my way up from like a 1+ million condo all the way to a 3 million. By the time I finish pay off my loan of the condo, I own this $3 million net asset. When I sell the $3 million condo, then I buy a $1.15 million HDB. Obviously, at that time, I can't take any loan. I will still have roughly 2 million or close to $2 million. Each person, me and my wife, will have about $1 million for retirement. And I think that is better retirement plan in my opinion, and that's something that I envision my retirement life to be so I honestly think no right no wrong in this approach. Honestly, it's just my suggestion that if you are someone in your 30s like myself or even late 20s thinking about buying your first property, think about it because there's no wrong in buying HDB $1 million, nothing like that. Of course, if you are very savvy in stocks and things like that, you can invest and grow your wealth in that way. For me, I'm just not in that area of expertise, so I'm just going to bank on property because I think property, if we look in the last few decades, it has gone up substantially, exponentially. Our parents have benefited a lot from that. So I'm just going to focus on this where I really want to build my net worth. So obviously, I'm not asking you to buy your first property as a $3 million condo if you start from nothing. I mean, that's really very difficult. But you can even consider a smaller 2-bedroom. Maybe the location is not as ideal, but you start from somewhere. Then when you get a pay bump, a promotion, you have extra savings, you save on your bonus, potentially you start building and upgrading to a bigger quantum private property. And then at age 55 or 65, whenever you feel like you want to retire, cash out everything, buy the 4-room HDB or the 2-bedroom condo or a 3-bedroom condo, and then the excess will be enough for retirement. So why I use these figures is that assuming that there's no inflation, these will be the figures. But assuming if there's inflation and your $1.15 million HDB becomes a $2 million, if your HDB becomes a $2 million HDB, then honestly, this $3 million condo should become somewhere like $5 to $6 million condo. Yeah, I think that is quite reasonable. So honestly, then the difference will still be substantial for your retirement. So if inflation does kick in, honestly, I think, yeah, HDB double, your private property should also at least double. Cost of living might also double, but you have already hedged against inflation in that way using property. But yeah, that's just my insights, my personal thoughts, because I think a lot of people don't really give this much thought. If really no choice, you have to start from HDB, yeah, just go for it. But just be mindful that at the end of 5 years, do start thinking about, is this about time for you to go to the private property route because you want to build on this so that you are able to have a nicer retirement and also potentially leave something for your kids, like if you are parents out there. I think that's something that resonates with a lot of parents over here. But yeah, if not, I've come to the end of the video. Yeah, think about retirement. Then if you need any help, feel free to contact me. My name is Nicholas. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please consider subscribe and like this video. I'll see you in the next one.